I'm ready. The camera is running. And here we go. Well, the first thing I'd like to say this afternoon, as I sit here in sunny California on a beautiful afternoon, I know the rest of the world may not be experiencing California weather, but that's the breaks of the game. In India, we'd call that karma, or in other words, I got what's coming to me, good and bad. But I'd like to say that the person that makes a lot of this possible is Tatiana. I never mention her last name because Tatiana, to me, is a name that conveys a powerful, amazing, beautiful person. So she's running the camera and doing all the technical stuff, and I'm doing the easy part, which is talking. And that comes easily to me because I think the joke is that my mother was scratched by a phonograph needle before I was born, so talking comes very easily. I'm trying to stop waving my hands so much, so I will. I'll try to keep that to a minimum. So anyway, what we're trying to do with this series, and both of us are one mind about this, is we're trying to create a block or a bunch of information that will help people to understand Dianetics, Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard, and the difference between all of that and something that came later called the Church of Scientology, which has gotten the public image of itself in a very bad place. And unfortunately, people might be confused into thinking that the bad image of the Church of Scientology means that the subjects, Dianetics and Scientology, are therefore not good. And I'm here to say, in fact, I'm alive today to a large degree because of those subjects. So I'm here to say the subjects themselves are good and valuable, and without spending a fortune or the rest of your life or having to join a church or do anything, through books that are inexpensive, through lectures that I hope remain and always will free, I'm going to try to work on the idea of giving you information that you can find useful and understandable. So that's what this is all about. And I admit openly my intention is to do everything I can to restore a good public image of the subjects called Dianetics and Scientology, having nothing to do with the Church of Scientology or, to a large degree, the later L. Ron Hubbard. As I've said before, I'm mostly talking about a period of time that I found most impressive, that was from roughly 1950, probably into the early 1960s. There were some other things that came along that were quite good, but that's the period that's the realest to me, and the one that I benefited the most from. It was a period when L. Ron Hubbard was easily accessible. He was being a human being in those days. He was not the God of the Church of Scientology. He was a fellow human being with a wife and a family and an urge to create and do things that would be of benefit to the people of this planet. And in my opinion, he did quite a bit in that direction in the first 10 years. And I'm not going to cry about that today. I did the first time because there's a sense of loss that L. Ron Hubbard, my hero, so to speak, went through many transitions, getting older and taking on and fighting with groups, sometimes whole countries, governments, psychiatry. He took these groups on and entered a game, a win-lose game with them, even though by his own statement, games, and real games where there are opponents and fighting and a playing field and a deadly serious business of winning. That kind of game tends to make you crazy after a while, because you're spending so much time trying to defeat, destroy, harm, befuddle, and do all the things you have to do in order to win a game, whether it's football, baseball, tiddlywinks, whatever it is. If you're really playing to win, it means you're trying to make your opponent lose. And as you know, as a human being, the feeling of losing is bad. And when people lose, they start making considerations like, I lost. It's because I'm not good enough. I'm not strong enough. I'm not intelligent enough. I'm a coward. I'm a fool. All these terrible self-invalidative considerations can arise when a person loses a game. The kind of game where you really give it everything you've got and you are defeated. Meanwhile, the winner's like, we won, we're number one. And they're boasting and bragging about making another person feel invalid, making another person feel stupid, making another person feel incapable. Those are all the elements that go into a real game. Take the game called War, which is a very popular game on planet Earth. It's been going on practically since recorded time, where usually a Group A and Group B decide to go to war. And what are the reasons that they go to war? It can be religion, it can be money, it can be territory, it can be just the joy of winning the game. Will make a war start. And war becomes it's like a drug. It's addictive to humankind and their governments and their leaders, because war is a way of saying, if I win, we're better than you. If I, for example, was a Catholic, spending a couple hundred years killing off Protestants who were fellow Christians, every time I beat the Protestants, I say, you see, the Catholics are much, much better than the Protestants. They're much closer to God, and God gave us the power to beat those Protestants. Now, when the Protestants win, they say the same thing. God was on our side, and that's why we won. And those rotten Catholics, we beat them because God really isn't that Catholic. He may have once been the God of the Jews, but we'll forget about that. They called him Jehovah, and one of his big sons was a guy that the Greeks called Jesus, but his real name in Hebrew was Yeshua or something like that. Came from an observant Jewish family, but the Christians have to forget that. They have made him into something called a Christian, even though he was born, raised, circumcised, bar mitzvah, and all the things that make someone a Jew. And to the best of our knowledge, aside from practicing carpentry, he was an observant Jew. He had some powerful ideas that some of the old-timers didn't like, but what's new about that? He was a Reformed Jew rather than an Orthodox Jew. And of course, people of the same religion will kill each other over differences in belief. So in the Middle East, we have two kinds of Muslims. We have the Sunni and the Shia Muslims. They all are fanatically and totally devoted to the Prophet Muhammad and the religion of Islam. And yet, not too long ago, those two factions went to war and killed each other by the millions over their religious differences. And the Protestants and the Catholics have been killing one another for hundreds and hundreds of years over differences, while claiming to represent the Prince of Peace, a former Jewish boy who has now been proclaimed a Christian. That's okay with me. People do all kinds of things in religion. But coming back to games, Hubbard made a real study of what games are all about, and whether they're small games or games that embrace a whole world. Certain factors in games, I wasn't even going to talk about this, but Tatiana is so inspiring that it just keeps coming out, and I really owe a lot to her. because she is an inspiration. Anyway, he analyzed what are the basic parts of a game. Now, it's not a game when you are not playing, when you're just playing for fun, where nobody wins. Let's pretend all the leaves are money and just play with them. Or just do something like where you just play, and you're not playing to win or lose. You're just playing catch. You're not playing baseball, just throwing the ball back and forth. Nobody's going to win. So in a real game, there have to be opponents. Team A, Team B. There have to be opponents because they're different. Team A wears the white uniform and Team B wears the blue and white uniform. So they're to get out there and kill each other. But the rules of the game say, no, it's baseball. You can't kill each other. You have to hit this ball, and you have to do this, and you have to do that. And here's the playing field, and here's the rules of the game, and you're trying as hard as you can to beat the other team. And you keep score, so at the end of the game, one wins, one loses. The winning team, the losing team, well, we just didn't get, the whole thing. And then at the end, there's things like winning the league championship in this country, America. They call it the World Series. It's mostly North America. And then you can go to what they call the World Series, but the world isn't represented in it. Just a few countries are. But in America, we have a small tendency to exaggerate. Like, we're so powerful. If anybody wants to play with us using the F word, we got a whole big arsenal of hydrogen bombs that we don't know what to do with them. So if anybody really upsets us in a big way and wants to play, like Russia or China or none of those little countries, they don't have it. We got hydrogen bombs. That's our real currency. Anybody really tries to put us down, we can destroy the world. Wow, what a win that would be. No more human life. No more life at all. The nuclear winter. The end of civilization. Blah! That's it. So, a few countries possess that power, and they realize that, well, if we play that game, there was a movie about it, if we play thermonuclear warfare as a game, nobody wins. Everybody loses. So, all the war games since then, they have to use what are called conventional things to kill people, like bullets and bombs and, all that nice stuff. But a real game, is something where people really intend to win and make the other team lose. And you know that when you make another person or another group of people lose, they don't feel good about themselves, they don't feel good about you, and they want revenge. They want to come back and beat you. And so the history of the world revolves around that kind of a cycle of losing and winning and losing and winning. One day the United States is up, the next day it's down, then it's China is up, and then China is down. And if you read a little bit of history, I don't want to encourage anybody to read too much because history is usually written by the winners. Nowadays, maybe the losers are getting a chance to write too. But if you look at it, you will just see this up and down thing throughout the history of our world. Now, a lot of people have come to the conclusion that games are bad and wrong and evil and not the way things should be. Well, it's true that games cost people, like when World War II, say 150 million people lost their lives in a period of 5 or 6 years through warfare, war games, 150 million. Well, that was deemed to be bad, except to the winners who won and defeated fascism and Hitler and Mussolini and so on and so forth. But that was a game, and the winners take all. The winners get the land, the resources, if they're lucky. It may be that the big winners will say, you may have helped, but we're taking most of it. But then the winners turn around and help the losers to become powerful again so that they can play some more. Because you have no game if you kill your opponent. That's something that's very important to remember. If you really go out there to kill an opponent or a group, you're losing the ability to play a game with them. So we try to play games where the opponent lives to play another day. He who fights and runs away lives to fight another day. But yes, so we go around the world after we destroy all these countries like Japan, Germany, whatever, and then we create a plan to bring them back to life and make them powerful again. Because it's no fun having nothing but victims, dead opponents, and destroyed civilizations. Now, sometimes we don't do that. I'll close with just this thought about games. When the Europeans came to the United States, whether it was from Spain or England or wherever they came from, they thought, my goodness, once they discovered it wasn't India. Christopher Columbus had a little mistake going. He thought he had arrived in India. Now, geographically, we know that he was a great navigator, but it was not India. Far from it. It's something that later came to be called the United States. But he thought it was India, so he immediately named the people who had been living here for a few thousand years Indians. No, they're not Indians. Indians come from India. Isn't that right? But we continue to call them Indians, even though, if you want to be nice about it, they're Native Americans. They were the people that were here before Columbus arrived, and just because he and the Spanish Empire started calling them Indians doesn't mean they're Indians, because this isn't India. But what I'm going to tell you is, briefly, instead of honoring and respecting Native American civilization with its religions, its beliefs, its culture, which was enormous, the essentially white people from Europe and else wherever came here and said, no, let's play a game. And in this game, when we beat you, we take everything. We take your land and everything away and chase you further to the west. Then we'll leave you alone. But wait, there's so many of us now. Let's fight again, and we'll take all the land up to the Mississippi River from you and chase you away. We'll put you away. We won, you lost. Get it? And then after we left the Mississippi River, we fought again, and we chased everybody back further and further and further until now, here I sit today on land that once belonged to, or at least was inhabited by, the wonderful Native Americans of what came to be called California. Now, they just run gambling casinos, are once very proud, wonderful people who didn't pollute the environment, who didn't make war necessarily on anybody, who were pleased to let other species live and survive, and they had clean water and clean air and clean people. They were wonderful, so we destroyed them because we wished to develop the land, and they weren't developing it. There was no real estate to sell or buy. And, well, the gold and the oil, well, we better make it ours because those dumb Native Americans wouldn't have developed it. And then where would we be? No Hollywood, no motor cars, no smog, no polluted air, no polluted land, no polluted food. We would have missed all that. So we did the right thing. We destroyed them. And we're paying the other side of the coin now. We're paying a tremendous price for it. Sick children, sick adults, lousy water, destroyed species, air that you wouldn't wish on an enemy. I'm making it somewhat worse than it is, but it is that bad. And now we're trying to clean up our mistakes from being poor game players. Because when we beat the Native Americans, we didn't then work to rebuild them into honorable and strong fighting opponents. We said, no, we don't want you as opponents anymore. We got guns, you got bows and arrows. we got machine guns. So we took it all away, and now we proudly sit on our stolen land saying, well, I own this piece of land now. It's mine. Oh, yes, our forefathers stole it from the native... Oh, that's right. So it used to be a crime to accept stolen goods, but we've lessened that as a crime. Now we call it, that's the real estate business, buddy. What are you talking about? Anyway, I want to thank Tatiana again for bearing with me in this segment, which got onto the subject of games and got onto the fact that L. Ron Hubbard took his church into games with large, powerful groups that he thought were bad. They thought he was bad. They thought he was bad. And they fought and they fought and they fought. And the longer you fight with something, there's a tendency, if you're losing, to say, well, I'll be more like that, because that's what won. So Scientology and its church tended to become more like, I'll get into that in the next segment, but it ain't nice, believe me. Thank you for listening, and we'll take a break here.